Good evening. Imagine this for a moment. You're walking home late, maybe scrolling through your phone, and then, just like that, your life is brutally ended, all for a few possessions.
It's a terrifying thought.
Absolutely, and it raises a critical question. How does our legal system ensure justice when the actual moment of theft, the taking, isn't directly seen by anyone?
That's a tough one.
Tonight, we're diving deep into a Supreme Court case that really grabbed public attention, went viral, you could say, and still sparks debate about exactly that circumstantial evidence versus individual rights here in the Philippines.
We're talking about the people of the Philippines versus J. Godoy Mancao.
That's the one. GR now. 228951, handed down on July 17th, 2019.
Let's set the scene. This happened back around September 2, 2007 in Davao City.
And the victim, tragically, was Peter Ray Garcia Enriquez, only 17 years old.
Just a kid. The person accused was J. Godoy Mancao.
Okay, so the allegation was, what exactly? That Mancao confronted Enriquez?
Yeah, allegedly grabbed him, took his things, a Nokia phone, a silver bracelet, necklace, his wallet.
And then the violence escalated.
Yes, the accusation is that Mancao then stabbed Enriquez, which ultimately caused his death. All over those items.
Horrific. But you mentioned the challenge. No one actually saw the taking of the items.
Correct. No eyewitness to that specific moment. However, the prosecution had a key witness, Manuel Bernito Jr.
Ah, okay. What did Bernito see?
His testimony was quite crucial. He stated he saw Mancao stab Enriquez in the neck.
He saw the stabbing itself.
Yes, and then saw Mancao dragging Enriquez's body towards an alley.
Wow, that's graphic.
And there's more. Bernito also testified he later saw Mancao washing away bloodstains, both from the scene and the alley.
Trying to clean up. Okay, and the police investigation, what did they find?
SBO2 Kelvin Magno led that. They found Enriquez's body, of course, but confirmed his belongings were gone.
Missing items consistent with robbery.
Exactly. And crucially, they found a blood trail.
Leading where?
It led from the crime scene directly to the boarding house where Mancao lived with his brother.
That seems pretty significant. Direct physical evidence linking the location.
It gets more interesting. The appellant's brother, Wang Yu Mancao, apparently confessed something to the police.
His own brother. What did he say?
He told them that Jay, the appellant, was involved and had actually fled the city, gone to Maco and Davao del Norte.
So the brother pointed the finger and gave his location.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Now, that confession itself isn't direct evidence against Jay in court, but it certainly gave the police a very strong lead.
You bet. And did they find him in Maco?
They did. They arrested Mancao there. And guess what they found in his possession?
Let me guess. Something belonging to the victim.
Bingo. A silver necklace. Plus, a pair of pants that appeared to be stained with blood.
The necklace. Was it identifiable?
Highly. This became a pivotal piece of evidence. Peter's father, Pedro Enriquez, took the stand.
Must have been incredibly difficult for him.
Unimaginable. He identified that specific silver necklace, said he'd given it to Peter as a gift.
He was certain it was the same one.
Yes. He even pointed out a unique detail. It had a T-pendant with 3 stones set into it, a very specific identifier.
Wow. Okay, so you have the witness seeing the stabbing and cleanup, the blood trail, the brother's statement leading to the arrest, and the victim's specifically identified necklace found on the suspect. That's quite a collection of circumstances.
It really is, and that's what the courts had to grapple with.
So let's talk about the lower courts. What did the regional trial court, the RTC, decide?
The RTC looked at all this evidence and found J. Godoy Mancao guilty. Guilty beyond reasonable doubt of robbery with homicide.
Robbery with homicide. So they believed the killing happened because of the robbery.
Precisely. The sentence was reclusion perpetua.
Life imprisonment, essentially.
Correct. And they also ordered him to pay damages, $50,000 for moral damages, another $50,000 for civil indemnity, and $22,800 for actual damages proven.
And their reasoning, even without the eyewitness to the taking?
They explicitly relied on the circumstantial evidence. The RTC stated that the prosecution witnesses and the evidence formed an unbroken chain proving all the elements of the crime.
An unbroken chain. Okay. So the case then went up to the Court of Appeals, the CA.
It did. Mancao appealed the decision.
And what did the CA make of it? Did they see it differently?
Not really, no. The Court of Appeals affirmed the RTC's verdict. They upheld the conviction.
So they agreed with the guilty verdict based on the circumstantial evidence?
Yes. They did modify the damages slightly. They increased the moral damages and civil indemnity to $75,000 each.
A bit higher.
Yes. And they added that standard 6% per annum interest on all the damages, kicking in once the judgment became final.
And importantly, did they comment on the evidence itself?
They did. The CA specifically backed the trial court's assessment, saying they found the prosecution witnesses credible and the circumstantial evidence sufficient.
So, two courts agreeing on guilt based on this chain of circumstances. That brings us to the Supreme Court.
The final arbiter.
What was the core question, the main legal issue put before the Supreme Court?
It really boiled down to this. Did the Court of Appeals make a mistake in upholding the conviction for robbery with homicide, especially given that, as we've discussed, there was no direct proof, no eyewitness seeing Mancao actually take the items?
That was the crux of the appeal then, the lack of that direct evidence.
Exactly. The defense argued that gap should create reasonable doubt.
And how did the Supreme Court rule? What was their final decision?
The Supreme Court found the appeal. Well, they said it was utterly lacking in merit.
Strong words. So they upheld the conviction again.
They did. They affirmed the Court of Appeals decision, although they did make some further adjustments to the damages, which we can get into.
Okay, but fundamentally, they agreed with the lower courts. How did they justify convicting someone for robbery without direct evidence of the taking?
They went back to basics. First, they reiterated the definition of robbery with homicide under Article 294 of the Revised Penal Code.
Right, the legal definition.
Which requires, the taking of personal property belonging to someone else, using violence or intimidation, with animal lucrandi the intent to gain, and crucially, that a homicide is committed by reason or on the occasion of that robbery.
Okay, those are the elements, but how did they apply them here without the eyewitness?
They leaned heavily on the power of circumstantial evidence. The court acknowledged the lack of direct evidence for the taking, but stressed that doesn't automatically mean acquittal.
So circumstantial evidence can be enough, legally speaking.
Absolutely, provided it meets certain standards. The court cited the rules. You need more than one circumstance. The facts underlying those circumstances must be proven, and the combination of all those circumstances must lead to only one fair conclusion: guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
And they felt those standards were met here.
They did. They laid out that chain again. Bernito seeing the stabbing and the dragging.
The eyewitness to the violence.
SPO2 Magno recovering the victim's specific silver necklace from Mancao upon arrest.
Possession of the stolen item.
And Pedro Enriquez, the father, positively identifying that necklace as his son's.
Linking the item directly to the victim.
Exactly. And that possession aspect was key. The court brought up Section 3J, Rule 131 of the Rules of Court.
What does that rule say?
It establishes a legal presumption. Basically, if you're found with something that was recently stolen, the law presumes you're the one who took it and potentially the one responsible for the whole crime. Unless you can give a satisfactory explanation for why you have it.
And Mancao couldn't.
Apparently not. The court found he failed to justify his possession of Peter's necklace. So that presumption kicked in, helping establish both the taking and the animus lucrandi, the intent to gain.
I see. So the possession connects him to the robbery element and the homicide element.
They came largely from Bernito's testimony, the direct witnessing of the stabbing. The court noted the lower courts found his testimony clear, consistent, no hint of ill motive. And the Supreme Court generally defers to the trial court on witness credibility, since they saw the witness testify live.
Makes sense. What about Mancao's defense? Denial, alibi.
Yes, that was his defense. But the court essentially dismissed it, calling denial and alibi inherently weak, especially against strong positive identification and circumstantial evidence. They just weren't enough to overcome the prosecution's case.
So the conclusion was?
The court concluded that all these pieces, all these circumstances, formed an unbroken chain. They pointed logically to Mancao being the perpetrator, that his main goal was robbery, and that the killing was intrinsically linked to that act done either to facilitate the robbery or as a direct consequence of it.
An unbroken chain leading to guilt beyond reasonable doubt.
That was the Supreme Court's finding.
And you mentioned they adjusted the damages again?
Yes, just to align with current jurisprudence on amounts. They kept the reclusion perpetua sentence, as there were no mitigating or aggravating circumstances found. But they increased exemplary damages to $75,000 and added $50,000 in temperate damages, keeping the civil indemnity and moral damages at $75,000 each.
Temperate damages.
Those are awarded when some financial loss is clear, but the exact amount can't be proven with certainty. It acknowledges the loss happened, and of course the 6% annual interest on all amounts until fully paid remained.
It's a powerful illustration, isn't it? How circumstantial evidence works in practice in our justice system. It makes you think, how should courts weigh this kind of evidence, especially when you don't have that smoking gun, that direct witness?
It's a massive responsibility for the courts. Each circumstance has to be proven solidly. And then the leap from those proven facts to the conclusion of guilt, it has to be the only reasonable conclusion possible. No other plausible explanation should fit the facts. It requires incredibly careful reasoning.
Definitely food for thought. What's the key thing you take away from this deep dive into the Mancao case? We'd love to hear your thoughts too. Drop your comments and main takeaways below.
For me, understanding the legal pillars here is crucial. First, robbery with homicide. It's not just robbery and homicide separately. The killing has to be connected, committed by reason or on the occasion of the robbery, with that intent to rob being primary.
Right. And second, circumstantial evidence. It's indirect proof, yes, but powerful when it meets the criteria. Multiple proven circumstances that, together, leave no reasonable doubt about guilt. It's about connecting the dots logically.
Then there's the presumption of guilt from possession of stolen goods. That legal shortcut, almost being caught with recently stolen items, puts the burden on you to explain it. Otherwise, the law presumes you're involved in the theft and related acts.
A very important presumption in theft and robbery cases. And finally, anima lucrandi, that specific intent to gain. It's not enough to just take something. For robbery, the prosecution has to show you intended to profit or gain from the taking, though this is often presumed from the act itself.
Understanding these doctrines really helps clarify how the court reached its decision in a case like Mancao, where the evidence wasn't all laid out simply.
Absolutely. If you found this breakdown of a landmark Supreme Court decision valuable, definitely hit subscribe. We do these deep dives regularly, unpacking complex legal issues here in the Philippines and sometimes beyond.
Don't miss out on future discussions that aim to keep you informed and thinking critically about the law.